Charles Darwin wrote a book. The first words that we all know are the origin of the species. Now, would someone please read out loud the rest of that title? Quickly, can someone look that up?
On the origin of species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life.
Oh, and do you know what Charles Darwin writes in that book? He writes, baboons, chimpanzees, Negroes, and Australian Aborigines are lower levels of this evolutionary cycle, and we do know the Western white European race ultimately will survive.
Like intellectual inconsistency,
Right.
with having moral relativist beliefs, or at least objective moral or objective morality is
Right.
inconsistent with atheism.
Correct.
But I think I would say that I still have moral beliefs. I wouldn't necessarily call them like morally relativist or anything like that.
Okay.
But I think because of biology, we have a reason to do a thing that looks a lot like morality, which is care about one another, care about the success of humanity as a species, and that has shown itself in a thing that we now call ethics and morality. So how is that like intellectually inconsistent, I guess? Like, what's wrong with just saying that morality does exist, it's not necessarily objective?
I've got no problem with an atheist who says morality's relative and I create my own morality. That's consistent. Where it turns inconsistent is, and my morality is the right one. My understanding of good and evil is correct. And if you contradict me, you're wrong. Baloney. If morality is relative, you believe something is moral today, you believe tomorrow it's immoral, no problem. It's all relative. If you think abusing children is wrong today, and you think tomorrow that abusing children is right, no problem. It's all relative. Just try and live that out. And you can't live it out. Now, my point is real simple, guys. You know very well that I've stood out here now for a lot of hours with Stuart, and we have both claimed we follow Jesus Christ. If after I finish speaking here, you watch me go out and womanize, what are you going to call me? Thank you. And that is a compliment. Because what you're saying is, Cliff, I took you seriously when you said you're a follower of Christ. And now you're finished speaking out here, and you're going to go out and womanize? You call me hypocrite, and you're right. I'm a hypocrite. Similarly, you tell me you're an atheist, that you believe morality is relative, but then you hold to these objective morals that you've created in your head, and I'm going to call you intellectual hypocrite. The same way if I say I'm a follower of Christ, and I go out and womanize, you're right. I'm a hypocrite. I'm not living out what I say I believe. Make sense?
Yes, I think I slightly disagree with part of the premise,
Okay.
being that I believe that murder is, it's sort of a semantic issue, wrong. But when I say wrong, what I mean is I believe that nobody should murder. And so I will treat someone differently if they murder someone because I believe they should not do that. But the reason I believe everybody should not do that is because I think humans are wired, from a biological sense, to think murder is wrong because we want humans to reproduce. That's why we have certain biological things like a community building instinct or like a sex drive or something like that. Humans are wired to like want to coexist with other humans and bring humanity up, which is why I will always say that child abuse is bad, and I will always say that murder is bad. My morals are not relative. I don't think just because I believe that murder is bad, that if you believe murder is not bad, you're suddenly correct. My morals are rigid. I just don't think they're objective.
Okay, so I would call you an arrogant, rigid twit. You're telling me morality is relative, but I'm so rigid, Cliff, that if you disagree with me, I'm going to tell you you're wrong. Well, who on earth do you think you are? You're no better than me. And if I think that murder is good, I'm not wrong. in any real sense. So I like the way you said, I'm just being rigid. Yeah, well, I don't think that's very tolerant. I don't think that's very open-minded. If you believe it's really all relative and you and I disagree, you're not going to tell me I'm wrong, because that's being arrogantly rigid. I mean, it's like, why is murder wrong? Because I'm an American. We Americans believe that murder's wrong. Big whoop. So what if you're an American? If you come from a different culture and you think that murder's good, then for you it's good. And if there is no God, morality is based on the individual, the culture, the power elite, or it's based on God. Those are the only four options, guys. If you know a fifth, please tell me. Now, if there is no God, morality is relative, which means it's all a crapshoot. Now, study the Nuremberg trials. Those Nazi officers hired some brilliant Nazi lawyers. And right in the middle of the Nuremberg trials, the Nazi lawyer said to the Allied judges, "You're coming from a different culture into Nazi Germany, and you're judging these Nazi officers who gassed Jews. They only gassed Jews because their commanding officers ordered them to. They were simply carrying out orders. Who on earth do you think you are as allies coming from the United States, from other European countries, coming into Nazi Germany and telling us Nazis that to gas Jews is wrong?" And the Nuremberg trial shut down until Robert Jackson, the American consul, stood up and said, "Excuse me, there is a law above the law of culture, and according to that law, it is evil to gas Jews." And the Nuremberg trials kicked back in, and justice was served. The lawyer was correct. If there is no God, and if morality is culturally defined, who on earth do you think you are to come from your culture and tell me and my culture that I'm wrong?
In the dialogue above, the two speakers present the argument that morality can be biologically grounded without being objective, and I find this argument to be fundamentally flawed. The opening segment of this dialogue centers on a critical philosophical tension, whether morality can be both non-objective and yet binding, rigid and universally prescriptive. The atheist interlocutor attempts to resolve this tension by appealing to biology, specifically evolutionary wiring, communal instincts, and species survival, as the foundation for moral norms. At first glance, this position appears reasonable. Humans do, in fact, exhibit strong social instincts. We are biologically inclined toward cooperation, empathy, and mutual protection. These tendencies undoubtedly explain why moral behaviors often emerge across cultures. However, explanation is not justification. Describing the origin of a behavior does not establish its moral authority. The core contradiction arises when the speaker simultaneously claims 1. Morality is not objective. 2. Moral rules are rigid. 3. Those who disagree are wrong. These three claims cannot coherently coexist. If morality is not objective, if it is not grounded in something that transcends individual or collective preference, then moral disagreement becomes a clash of instincts, not a matter of truth. In that framework, calling someone wrong is merely expressing personal or cultural disapproval, not identifying an actual moral error. Yet throughout the dialogue, the atheist speaker repeatedly does exactly that. He insists that murder and child abuse are wrong in a way that others should recognize, regardless of disagreement. This move implicitly smuggles objectivity back into the system while verbally denying it. This is not a minor inconsistency, it is a structural one. Biology can explain why we feel moral outrage. It cannot explain why anyone ought to obey it when doing so conflicts with self-interest, power, or survival. Evolutionary explanations describe what tends to happen. They do not generate moral obligation. A biological impulse has no authority over a rational agent once that agent recognizes it as merely an impulse. This is precisely the point made through the reductio arguments in the dialogue. If morality is grounded in biology and survival, then scenarios can always be constructed where murder, exploitation, or oppression become evolutionarily advantageous. At that point, moral condemnation loses its footing. One may dislike such outcomes, but one cannot declare them morally wrong in any binding sense. The accusation of arrogance leveled in the dialogue is philosophically significant. To insist that one's biologically derived moral intuitions are binding on others, while denying any objective moral law, is to elevate oneself to the position of moral legislator without justification. That is not humility before reason. It is moral imperialism without metaphysical grounding. By contrast, the critique offered by the Christian interlocutor is not that atheists lack moral feelings. Clearly, they do not. But that their worldview lacks the ontological resources to support the moral claims they already live by. The argument is not psychological, it is logical. You can live morally without believing in God, but you cannot justify objective moral claims while denying any objective moral source. This distinction is the fulcrum of the entire debate. The decisive weakness of the biologically grounded moral framework presented in this dialogue is not emotional, rhetorical, or theological. It is logical. The attempt to preserve moral seriousness while rejecting moral objectivity collapses under its own weight, once power, conflict, and competing interests enter the picture. The speaker insists that his moral beliefs are rigid, but not objective. This distinction is crucial and fatal. Rigidity describes psychological commitment. Objectivity describes truth status. A belief can be rigidly held and still be false, arbitrary, or unjustified. History provides endless examples of rigid moral convictions producing catastrophic outcomes. When moral claims are detached from an objective standard, disagreement cannot be resolved by appeal to reason, only by appeal to force, consensus, or survival advantage. This is precisely why moral relativism, when taken seriously, inevitably privileges power. The strongest, the most persuasive, or the most numerous will define what counts as right. This is not a hypothetical concern. It is the unavoidable consequence of denying any moral law that stands above cultures, individuals, and historical moments. The Nuremberg example raised later in the dialogue is already implicit here. Without an objective moral standard, the Nazi defense is not immoral. It is logically coherent. Cultural norms, biological drives, and obedience to authority would all support their actions under a relativistic framework. The only reason we reject that conclusion is because we implicitly believe in a moral law that transcends culture and biology. The atheist interlocutor wants morality to function as a moral law, while grounding it in moral preference. That is asking morality to do work it is metaphysically incapable of doing under that worldview. Furthermore, grounding morality in biology subtly undermines human dignity. If moral value arises from evolutionary usefulness, then individuals who are weak, disabled, unborn, elderly, or socially burdensome possess less inherent value. The speaker does not accept this implication emotionally, but his framework cannot prevent it logically. This is why the Christian critique strikes deeper than personal belief. It exposes a mismatch between how people live and what their worldview can justify. The atheist speaker lives as if human beings possess intrinsic worth, as if murder is truly wrong regardless of context, and as if moral obligations bind even when inconvenient. Yet his worldview reduces those convictions to evolutionary byproducts, feelings we inherited, not truths we discovered. That is the essence of the charge of intellectual inconsistency. It is not an insult, it is an analysis. Christian moral realism, by contrast, offers a coherent explanation for why moral intuitions feel binding rather than optional. If moral law flows from a morally perfect, rational, and personal source, then moral obligations are neither arbitrary nor oppressive. They are expressions of reality itself. In this light, the debate in this first section is not about whether atheists can be moral. They clearly can. It is about whether morality, as they experience it, makes sense within their stated worldview. On that question, the dialogue leaves us with an uncomfortable but unavoidable conclusion. The moral life we all recognize presupposes a moral reality that biology alone cannot supply. The first section of this dialogue demonstrates that attempts to ground morality exclusively in biology preserve moral emotions, but destroy moral authority. Without objective moral truth, moral judgments become expressions of preference rather than statements of fact, and justice becomes indistinguishable from power. The coherence of moral experience itself points beyond evolutionary explanation toward a transcendent moral foundation.